Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast, a podcast where Barry and I talk about board games. How you doing, Barry?
Good, good. Happy to be here, but not happy about the heat.
Well, at least you've got some aircon. We've also been melting up here in the north, which is unusual.
It has been unbearable, even with the aircon, struggling to keep up. And you know it's bad because in the kitchen I have a beer machine, and normally it sits at 3 degrees, but it only functions up to like 35, and it's sitting at 11 degrees, so that would suggest that it's 43 degrees in the in the kitchen. So warm beers all around.
Time to get some ales on.
Yeah.
Yep. We've got. I've been Googling the price of air conditioning because I'm so.
Listen, there's no price I wouldn't pay. I've had the aircon in for like 4 or 5 years. And those years where London gets up to 40, you're just so thankful. It's like even if I can't afford to have any other electrics running, that aircon is going to be on.
We're unplugging the fridge and the beer machine to keep the aircon.
Correct. And I would do it again.
Well, then we all appreciate you making the effort to turn on your computer and record this podcast for us. We're going to bring you some valuable information today. And actually, we've got some news that we're going to cover. We've got some headlines. We've got about 4 or 5 of those, and then we're going to get into the games we've played. I'm going to talk in a little bit of detail about 2, then we're going to do a deep dive on 1, and I'll do a few honorable mentions quickly at the start as well. And that will be the episode. I suppose the big deep dive, for those of you who are interested, you will have seen it in the thumbnail. It is, of course, Revive, which we talked about a little bit earlier on podcast 29 when we talked about Recall, which is the new one from the same designers. This was a slightly heavier one that came out a little while ago. And we played it together kind of by accident, and now we thought we'd talk about it.
I played it a few times after as well.
Yeah, I showed it to Barry, and then Barry played it a bunch. I'm just going to give you a lot more information than I can. But before that, we'll talk about the news.
There you go. Jingles, baby.
Barry's saving me some editing there.
News, as always, cover some of the sort of crowdfunding sites, and one that we talked about in passing in previous podcasts has been Time Troopers from, I want to say, Molinarius Games as publisher, and they previously published games about whales and lakes. But I don't know what the relationship is from the designer or whether they're branching out, but this game is Time Troopers, and it is now live on GameFound and will be live, assuming you watch this in a timely fashion, hit that like and subscribe button. Notifications to the right. And so this is it's a functionally solo game. You can play with another player, but you're making the same decisions as you would be solo. So let's just say it's a solo game. It is a game about a time travel agency going and keeping things on the straight and narrow. You'll travel back to ancient Egypt through Vikings into the future with this one, and it's a deck builder. You're building up your hand of cards. You're using time points to play cards from your hand and pay for your troops. Those troops are then combating the enemies as you go through, and the aim of the game is to get to the end of the story successfully. And I believe there's a little bit of a sort of campaign involved with the game where you're going to play through multiple setups and you unlocking a few cards and stuff as you go. There's a sort of ring-bound book that you go through for each of the different scenarios for playing. This was a game that I previously mentioned because I thought it very much looked like AI art, and all the ads I was seeing on Facebook for it, I was like, that is AI. And then the more I looked into it, I was like, I can't really tell. And then I seen them at the Games Expo, and looking at the cards close up, it does look like normal person art, not AI art. And the game looks okay. They're selling the game a single flat rate, $50 or 50 UK dollars, whatever we function in. And that's it. There's no deluxe upgrades. There's no add-ons. There's nothing along those lines. You pay the one price and you get the version of the game, which is not seen quite so much in this day and age. They have just passed their funding goal of £10,000, and that comes with a few extras, comes with a soundtrack for the game, comes with a couple of extra bits and pieces, particularly if you pre-backed it for that, and that is available for people to have a look at right now.
Yep, absolutely. And their pitch is, if you back it now, you get 20% off the final retail price. And
sure, but you're also paying a tenner for delivery, so it's the same.
Shh. Yep. Well, if you're into solo games and deck builders, then you can check this out. It's also a campaign game, and that might be something that you're interested in.
And then a new game I hadn't seen before, but suddenly it was everywhere. People were playing it, and that is Fliptoons. So this is Thunderworks Games, most famously known for the is it Dungeon Roll? Is that what it's called? No, Dungeon Roll's that other game I'm thinking of. Role Player. And that genre of games, so Stone Spire Architects, what else do they do? Cartographers, everything in that area. This is a new IP for them. It is a game based on the sort of Looney Tunes style of art, and is a sort of deck builder, random tableau generator. Right, so you're playing 6 cards from the deck that you've built, but you don't get to choose them, and they come out in the top or bottom row. So this is quite a light game. There's a market of cards that you can buy each round. The cards you flip over generate points. You use those points to buy and dismiss cards, and then you go again. You shuffle them up. You deal out 6 cards again for your next go, and whenever a player passes the 30 points mark in a single tableau build, that signals the end of the game. Whoever gets the highest score on their next flip wins. So even if you trigger the end of the game, you get a chance to improve, and then you want to be winning on that last go. So if you can streamline your deck to just the perfect 6 cards, and they come up in the perfect 6 card order to get those points, you will win. And this is a game that I initially thought that's a very clever idea. I like the art. The art sort of, that I want to say 30s style, like
it's Cuphead.
Like even,
it's Cuphead, Townsfolk Tussle.
Yeah, Cuphead style, yeah. And the idea of not having full control of your deck as it comes out, I was okay with that as well. Some cards can stack, some cards will flip cards face down if they're particularly powerful, and you're looking to negate that with special card powers along those lines. And I thought, yeah, this could be a lot of fun. And then I played it a few times, and it wasn't as good as I hoped, to be honest. I've only played solo at the moment, so I played on easy mode, beat it. Played on medium, beat it. Played on hard, beat it. 1 card to spare. And each time, to be fair, I went for a different selection of cards to try and get the sort of top scores, and different strategies. I went for the stacking cards, I went for the high cost cards that had drawbacks, and I went for just generic points. And it was okay, but I don't think there's anything more to it. Like, I can't see a reason to keep going back to this game after a couple of plays. And so whilst it was okay, it might be one to try before you buy, and I'd say give it a couple of games before you really commit to whether or not you might want it.
And where did you play it?
None of your business. And I'll thank you for not asking me any more personal questions on the podcast.
I just thought people might want to try it at
home. Well, you might get an idea in a moment, but I am not to say. So, anyway, yes, it's being advertised through all your favourite influencers, and now from me, but you can tell why they're not coming to me for a brand deal.
I can't believe they didn't put these incredible quotes up on their campaign page.
I know, like, honestly, no, you're never going to get brand deals with me on the channel, Mike. Like, people are just going to be like, he's never said a good thing about a game in his life.
Does he even like
He doesn't
games?
even like games. Lols. I do like some games. I like Twilight Imperium 4. Oh, what a segue. So just the other day, Twilight Imperium 4 was announced as an alpha release on Board Game Arena. Now, tend to shy away from reporting alpha games because one of the conditions of being an alpha tester, a game being available on this list does not warrant that it will go through the whole process and become available to the whole community. Consequently, we ask you to kindly refrain from publicising the list to not create unfounded expectations. And there are a lot of games in alpha that have sat there for longer than I've been an alpha tester, like 2-3 years, and they're not coming out. Deal with it. But this was published over on Reddit, and it's been on Facebook and everything else. I think it's
so. This is quite well known.
Yeah, this is quite well known. I don't think it's a secret. And of course, Twilight Imperium, FFG, owned by Asmodee. Asmodee own Board Game Arena. Every chance that this will come to fruition.
Did they buy it? Board Game Arena? I forgot that. Do you know? I forgot that they did that.
Yep. No, that's why there's so many. I mean, it's not the only reason, but it's part of why there's so many games on there now. And I don't know. Again, this isn't necessarily something that's for public release, but for some reason in my Google Docs, when I was in there, I'm privy to Board Game Arena's. I've got a slideshow for publishers on revenue split and stuff in there, so I was like, I'll have a look at that. But that was very interesting. Thanks for sharing that with me, Board Game Arena people. I don't know why you've added my email and my account to there, but I'll have a look. Of course, I'll have a look.
Any inside scoops, Barry? Any interesting information?
Yeah, it's interesting enough. It may well be a public document, right? It may be available to anybody that asks for it. I just found it odd that it was the first thing that was in my Google Drive when I logged in. It's like, okay. Sure.
Asmodee is publicly traded, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So some amount of revenue information must be published.
Oh, actually, are they publicly traded, or are they? Because they were private equity.
Asmodee became publicly traded in February this year.
Right. Yes. So fairly recent. I will say that the amount of money that Arc Nova must be making is ridiculous. At least as a percentage of what Board Game Arena's paying out. They have, let me do some quick maths, like 30 times as many games as anything else on the go.
Wow.
At any given time. Very popular. Anything you've spotted?
Oh, was that the end of the conversation about TI? I thought we were going to make a bit more fanfare. Oh,
well, obviously we spoke about it in the podcast, a deep dive between Twilight Imperium 4 and Eclipse.
Eclipse versus TI was 28.
Podcast 28, so a few months back. Twilight Imperium is playable elsewhere and has large communities. So certainly porting people in to becoming Board Game Arena subscribers and playing on there maybe will require that the game runs very smoothly and effortlessly, and eventually bringing those expansions in as well. The unofficial tabletop simulator mod is very popular within the community. It is obviously requires a lot of manual knowing the rules and being able to manipulate the elements. Board Game Arena is very automated as a system, and they'll look to continue with that. If they get it right, and they can bring a game of Twilight Imperium down to 4 hours, say, a speedy 4 hours, then that would be an achievement, and I think people would make the switch to play. Because I'll also say Board Game Arena is not terribly expensive as a subscription, and I definitely get my money's worth every month.
Yeah, I think it's a good move by them, to put that up there. It's,
I think it has a large online community anyway, and so bringing that back in house, and if nothing else, getting the balance data, right? So the win losses, being able to consolidate that and share that, potentially useful for future expansions and useful for the community as a whole, doing any kind of balancing if they're willing to share it.
I guess that, I was going to say there is quite a lot of good documentation already in existence around the factions and what they're good at and which ones are stronger or more intuitive, have better low-level heuristics so newer players can approach them more easily, that kind of stuff. There's lots of really good information out there for Twilight Imperium around that, but it does seem like these days FFG is a studio that only makes Twilight Imperium, so maybe they can take that data and do something useful with it, given that they're not doing anything else.
Their only board game at this point, right?
Exactly.
I'll tell you what they'll do with it. They'll slap a Star Wars IP on it and
oh my god, can you imagine? They'll call it Star Wars Imperial.
Yeah, I'm in. Sign me up. But that's all I got to say about that.
Well, we've got one more here. We've got a new game from Frixelius Publishing, of course famous for Terraforming Mars. Frixelius are doing more Terraforming Mars. They're doing Legacy of Mars, which is a Terraforming Mars campaign game. This has just been announced. It is a campaign game. It is a standalone product, so it's not going to combine with any of your existing Terraforming Mars stuff. They've said that there will be some of the old cards that you're familiar with will be in the game. There'll be a bunch of new cards in the game. They're adding new mechanisms, but the idea is that you take on the role of a corporation and then over the course of several games of Terraforming Mars, develop and expand this corporation. And it's coming to crowdfunding in autumn.
It sounds good to me. I still rate Terraforming Mars. I think it is a fun game to play. I have issues with it, as do many people that play it, but I think it's enjoyable. I have just purchased, and I'm now awaiting, what was the fantasy Terraforming Mars? Just finished their second Kickstarter with another game, delivered on a second Kickstarter with another game. It was effectively Terraforming Mars mechanisms, but you're fighting angels on a boat. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Didn't hear of it.
Do you know what I'm talking? No idea what I'm talking about?
Nope.
This was a game that has very famously Terraforming Mars evolved. Has its own problems, but took everything that they learned from Terraforming Mars and put it into this game.
Well, I have not seen this. I've not had a chance to try this.
The problem with the board game landscape these days, Mike, is there is too much. There is just straight up so many games that come out all the time. You can't possibly keep up without the help of fantastic podcasts like this.
Yeah, it's useful to have some trustworthy creators sharing valuable information.
And if there's a game you want to know whether or not I like it, I probably don't.
Look, if we didn't talk about it on the podcast, it means we definitely tried it and we didn't like it. It's definitely not because we're only human and don't have time to try everything. Yeah. Though that's interesting. I would definitely give Legends of the Void a try, I guess. Legacy of Mars, also interesting. I get to play. We played Terraforming Mars way back when it first came out on the channel because we're quite old, and we liked it, and I still have it. I have all the expansions. I didn't get that enormous big box they produced with all the plastic tiles because I've got a nice insert that fits everything into the original core box. And I quite like having that little box.
Yeah, you're not missing a huge amount by having to fish the bits of plastic out that box when it's getting that first tile out's tricky.
So I've got so I'm quite happy. It is hefty though. The original core box now with everything in it and all the extra boards and stuff. It's amazing. It all fits. It's very heavy, but I do still get it out. I do still play it. I do still enjoy it. I haven't found a sweet spot where I'm like, this is the configuration of expansions I like, because all of them is just too long. And there's not one of them where I'm like, this is the expansion that sort of changes the... I still kind of prefer it with just Prelude. Yeah,
that's fine. Do you use like Venus Next rules where if nobody's terraformed, you move something along anyway?
No, but I have not played... I guess I've not played enough that's been a problem.
Yeah, it's not really a problem whatever way, whether you do it or don't, to be honest. But if you are finding it drags a little, just making sure something gets terraformed every turn does speed it up. But that's to the detriment of engine building.
No, I've not found it necessarily dragging. What I have found is that with all the expansions, it's just a lot. It's just a lot to remember and a lot to do. And I'm not sure if the added length necessarily makes it a better game, because once you're playing the drafting variant, it already is quite long.
And I thoroughly recommend playing the drafting variant. Much more.
Yeah, I mean, don't not play the drafting variant. I think that's how everyone plays. But yeah, so interested to see how the campaign mode is set up, but I'm not necessarily sure that I need a Terraforming Mars campaign in my life. I feel like it would sort of sit with all the other campaign games that generally don't see enough play. Sad.
But it's still a little unclear whether it is a legacy game, right?
Yeah, so we discussed this because there's nothing to suggest that it's a legacy game. It's being marketed as a campaign game, but it is called Legacy of Mars, which feels like a really odd name given the proximity of campaign games and legacy games. Obviously distinct, with the distinction being that a legacy game implies destruction of components or a one-off playthrough, so the use of stickers and things like that. You can't easily reset it and go again, whereas a campaign game requires changes ongoing that carry over game to game, but can be reset to its original state and replayed. So most legacy games, in fact, all legacy games, as far as I'm aware, are campaign games, but not all campaign games are legacy. So this seems to be a campaign game called Legacy of Mars that is not a legacy game. Confusing.
We'll find out in due course.
We will, once more information's announced. Apparently there are some play tests this weekend at the FrixCon, where Frix play presumably Terraforming Mars all weekend, but the weekend will have passed and we don't know anything about it, and we don't know anyone who's there. So unfortunately we can't cut away to our reporters in the field, but we will find out more in fall when everyone finds out.
But just to say, Frix Games, we are available, have passport, will travel, to invite us next year.
Yep, absolutely right. So bring us along, we'll play whatever you got.
Terraforming Mars 2.
Terraforming Mars 2. Red Dust Boogaloo.
Yeah. But yes, that is all the news I have.
Yep, that wraps up the news. So I just thought I'd mention a few games that I've been playing. I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you would like a deeper dive on these games, you can secure the information you're interested in by supporting the show, either by commenting and liking and all those nice things that are free to do and we really appreciate, or by joining the Patreon, because we would love that if you could support the show that way. That would be great. I played Galaxy Trucker 2nd Edition Keep On Truckin', which is the expansion. It's nice. I think the 2nd edition is as good as the first. There's going to be a new expansion coming at Essen this year. I think it's actually coming at Gen Con, coming to Europe at Essen. That will add just more nonsense, some refined versions of stuff from the original game, as well as some new content that we haven't seen before, specifically different kinds of astronauts. I think at this time, people probably know whether or not they like Galaxy Trucker. They probably know enough about that. But, if you missed out on the 1st edition, which is now out of print, you can get the 2nd edition, which is pretty much just as good. I was reflecting on the fact that I do miss the peak nonsense of OG when I play the 2nd edition, just because there is so much nonsense in the 1st edition. 2nd edition is getting there. It looks like it's going in that direction. They've not, Czech Games Edition have not stopped supporting it, which is great. So hopefully we'll be getting back into that space in due course. What I especially miss are all the really weird ships and the 4th run ships. So you get these giant, massive nonsense ships, there's still no 4th run in the 2nd edition. There's just not big enough ships. So hopefully more of that in due course. I played Sidereal Confluence Bifurcation. If you don't know anything about Sidereal Confluence, it is a crazy, strange trading game. And I might talk a bit more about that later when I talk about another trading game. So I'll probably save that, but going into too much detail, but it's a sort of Sidereal Confluence is a 4-ish hour. You can get it down to like 3 hours if people are really across it. But it's quite a long trading game about space civilizations trading crazy goods, and it's very complex in theory. In practice, it's a bunch of yelling and trading cubes, and it's glorious. Bifurcation is the expansion, which offers alternate versions of all the different alien species. I managed to play Chaos in the Old World, the Horned Rat expansion, which you've been trying to do. I have not yet done.
No, I played it now.
Oh, you did? Okay, great.
Yeah, we got played. What did you think? Did you play as the Horned Rat?
No, I played as Slaanesh.
And did you win?
I did not, but that was primarily because Everin King made Tzitch.
No.
That's my excuse. No, there was two. It's so Chaos in the Old World. We're to keep it brief. For all of you that don't know, it's the Eric Lang game from Fantasy Flight Games. It came out in like 2009, I think.
I'll take the unders. I'm going to say 2008.
And then the second edition was like 2011 or 13. Actually, it might be 20. Yeah. Anyway.
2009.
2009.
You're right. Sad.
So that's the first edition. Second edition came a few years later, and the Horned Rat expansion sometime after that, a year after that or something. And then it was all done, and they've not reprinted it since. And it is sought after. It's a desirable game. It is very similar to Blood Rage with a few key differences. One being that there's no drafting of cards. Everyone just starts with their own cards, and you draw them into your hand or unlock them as you go. There's far fewer of them, so that whole drafting and sort of building of asymmetry that's in Blood Rage is gone. And also, the combat is resolved by rolling dice instead of playing combat cards from your hand, which you get in Blood Rage from drafting. And so, the big similarities are there is a PowerPoint system, just like Blood Rage, that you spend to take actions in the game. Also, combat is resolved at the end of a round, just like, well, in Blood Rage, do you trigger a resolution of a zone? I can't remember.
I also can't remember off the top of my head.
I'll tell you what it is. It's when it's an action. Someone takes an action to attack in Blood Rage, and then the area is resolved, and then it's done. So Chaos in the Old World has some amount of similarity in that in Blood Rage, you've got limited space where you can play characters out. And in Chaos in the Old World, you can have any number of figures in there, although the number of figures people have is slightly, well, it's not slightly more limited, but you can't get more, and then it's balanced differently. So like Khorne has a lot more figures than Slaanesh and things like that. But also there are these powerful power cards you can play from your hand, but there's only space for 2 cards per territory. So that feels a bit like the limited space for figures in Blood Rage, the limited space for cards in Chaos in the Old World. And those cards can contribute to the area control. So they add to your presence there, which is different than Blood Rage, where you're just counting who's got figures and who survives the combat. But the big similarity as well is that there is, in Blood Rage, at the end of each round, a territory is destroyed by Ragnarok. In Chaos in the Old World, it's a little bit more dynamic in that territories will become so corrupted by the Chaos Gods that they are ruined. And this can happen when enough people have added enough corruption to the area. But typically, an area is ruined at the end of each round, sometimes more than one. Rarely 0 are ruined, but in the same way, it's like a shrinking map, just like Blood Rage. So, you're just having territories taken off the board as the game progresses. But Blood Rage is only 3 rounds, and Chaos in the Old World is 7, so it's much longer. And both go up to 5, I think. And I don't know about... And you shouldn't play with Horned Rat at 5. I think Horned Rat is intended to be the 5th player. You can probably play it at 4, although it might be a bit wonky. And if you like Cthulhu Wars or Blood Rage, you're really going to like Chaos in the Old World. It's hard to find. So, maybe you know someone who's got it. If they give you a chance to play it, you should definitely check it out. There's a fair amount of randomness in it. The dice are pretty random. The card draw can be quite random. When you get the cards, it can be quite random. If you're Slaanesh, you're really reliant on corrupting nobles. 2 are put out at the start. That's hugely influential on how you're going to play the game and totally random. But I think once you get into that part of it, it's fun and it's quick and it's punchy and it's got enough to keep you interested. It can become a little bit, I think, of a foregone conclusion towards the end, depending on how things have shaken out. And in our game, the 5-player game we played, it was a little deterministic just because it was very apparent that some people had been effectively eliminated from the game. And I was tied for first with the other player, but there wasn't much anyone could do about thwarting his plans, so they just thwarted me. So be it.
Fair.
That's the game.
Yeah.
I possibly could have played a card that would have worked better in my favor, but so there might have been a route to victory for me. But part of the reason I didn't play that card and I played a different card was because I needed players to come to where I was so that it would ruin. They would add corruption and ruin. I wanted them to gather where I was, and I thought that if I didn't, the card I played made it easier for me to ruin it by myself. And so I figured if they think I'm going to do it on my own, they're going to come to get the points there. Whereas if they don't think I can do it by myself, they might stay away, and then it's not going to ruin, and then I might not get the points, and then I can't win. But what happened was they all came in because I made it too easy to ruin, and then they killed me. And I still got a bunch of points, but I didn't get quite enough. I was down by 2 or 3. But
very sad.
It was very close, and if I'd rolled slightly more murders on my dice, I could have also wiped the first player out of there. They wouldn't have got ruination points, and then I would have won. But the point is, I had a route to victory. Some things shook out the way they did. Got some random chance in the game. That's fine. I had a really good time. I'd definitely play it again, even though I do wish there was maybe a little bit of hidden scoring in it somewhere. That would be nice. There is also a system of spinny wheels, and that provide an alternate victory condition that's always interesting and provides a sort of extra stress for people to manage.
I'd say wheel victories are, I'd say, more common in my games than points.
Yeah, people seem to think that, so I thought this was quite an unusual one where you won by...
It's not massively
points.
Swung towards the dial over points, but the interesting thing about the Horned Rat, so the Horned Rat's a 5th player expansion, adds the 5th player, and where we're talking about the corruption and the ruination of an area, you would think adding another player without bumping up the values for ruination or corruption hitting 13 would be a problem, but the way that the Horned Rat troops work, they don't specifically, they're not additive.
Yeah, so the mechanism they've got for ruination, which is a big jump up in points, this is where you add enough corruption collectively to destroy the old world and bring it over to the side of chaos. Because thematically, you're all the chaos gods, you're kind of working together to ruin the old world, but you want to come out ahead of the other gods as well. So there's this... It's not a semi-cooperative vibe at all, but there is this element where you all want to add your corruption, and then there's going to be a big bonanza for whoever had added the most. And the threshold is 12 corruption to ruin an area, typically, and then whoever has the most share of that 12 will win the big points, and everyone who added something will also get some points. So you kind of are incentivized to participate as well. Unfortunately, corruption is only added by cultists, and you don't have enough. You never have enough cultists. So there's a dilemma there in the game design. Now, adding the Horned Rat is interesting because the Horned Rat player does not produce corruption, but instead they have tons of cultists, which are just these Skaven warriors. And if you don't know anything about Warhammer, that's rat people. And they count as corruption. And if they're present when it ruins, they count as having contributed as well, despite the fact they never actually contributed anything at all. So they've got this sort of like really parasitic relationship with the corruption mechanism, which is interesting.
Yep. Yeah, I enjoy it. I will bust it out again sometime soon, hopefully.
I did like Chaos in the Old World at 5 better than I like Blood Rage at 5. And I think that's because... Sorry?
Never played Blood Rage at 5.
So Blood Rage, I like Blood Rage best at 4. At 3, it becomes a very vicious knife fight with a lot of hate drafting. And it's a bit too much effort. I don't want to play that competitively when I'm playing Blood Rage. And that's a personal choice. Some people prefer that, and that's completely fine. I'm also happy to play it at 3. I'm not going to be like, no, if someone's really keen to play it. That's fine, but my preferred count with Blood Rage is 4, and then at 5 it gets really chaotic. I also like it at 5. I like the chaos, but Blood Rage at 5 is a real roller coaster of chaos. Whereas Chaos in the Old World, ironically, is not as chaotic. It is probably because the 5 asymmetrical factions are designed to interwork in the ways that they do. there's a clear design intent around the way all of these races are meant to work together. And, conversely, at a lower count, you have to take specific roles out, right? Which is interesting. Whereas Blood Rage, the factions don't really matter, and it's all about what cards you're drafting. You're designing the asymmetry as you go, and because of that, it can feel very, very chaotic. And especially in Blood Rage at 5, where you're not really sure who's taking what, you can't really hate draft anything, and there's a lot of information to track. But at least in Chaos in the Old World, you have some idea about what your faction's roles are and what your goals are, and so does everyone else.
Makes sense. And it's a good game. See, I like some games.
We like really old games that no one can buy.
Yeah. Because I'm an old man.
Well, let's move swiftly on to one that you can buy. I think because we're going to do a deep dive on Revive, we'll just blast through the two I've got here very quickly first. The first one is Above and Below Haunted by Ryan Lockett. So this is the follow-up to Above and Below. This was a crowdfunding campaign last year that delivered this year. Designed by Ryan Lockett, the auteur who runs Red Raven Games. Ryan Lockett's designed Sleeping Gods, Empires of the Void 2, Rome, Near and Far, and many others that I'm not mentioning because I picked my favorites. Although actually Near and Far is not my favorite. I just mentioned it because people know it. I actually sold my copy of Near and Far. Sad. But I just couldn't find a game mode with it that I particularly liked. Ryan Lockett is the artist of Above and Below Haunted, doing all the art for it. And of course the publisher as well. It's a 2 to 4 player game. BGG says best at 2. I'm inclined to agree. It is 60 to 1 to 2 hours. Yep, that's about right. And if you've played Above and Below, you've played this. Look, there is a few new mechanisms. I'll talk about them, but fundamentally, it's basically the same game with different stories. So I don't know if I've talked about Above and Below before on the podcast. It's a deeply flawed game. I really like it. I have a very soft spot for it. I've kept my copy of Above and Below. I play it with my partner. At a high level, Above and Below is a very simple tableau builder game with a choose-your-own-adventure attachment. What you're doing is you're building, and this applies to both games, what you're doing is you're building a village or a town. You're explorers that have set off to some unknown land, and you're building a new civilization there. And you've got these little workers that you spend round to round. And what they're going to do is they're going to build buildings. They're going to recruit more workers to come and live in your village. And they're going to go off on expeditions. And you build a tableau, which represents the buildings in your village, by buying them from marketplaces. And there's a whole bunch of marketplaces. There's 2 marketplaces that are kind of in constant flux. Every time someone buys a building, a new one comes out. And that's the most familiar marketplace to most people who know tableau builders and deck builders. There's also 2 set marketplaces, one of which is asymmetrical powers. And so that's kind of designed to allow you to do, their buildings are all bought with money. You've got money that you have to manage. You've got to get some income. There's going to be income at the end of every round. You can expand your income by collecting different kinds of goods. And the more variety you have, the more money you're going to get at the end of the round. I think the games are 7 rounds. Or maybe 8, but you're going to buy these asymmetrical power buildings to get some cool different powers, or you're going to buy the big buildings that start on the table that give you endgame scoring conditions. And so you might want to wait to find out, what your strategy is this game to buy those buildings, or you might buy them very early on. Well, they're very expensive, so you probably won't, but you might try to buy them quickly so you can lock in what you're going to be doing strategically for the game. In that sense, that's why I say it's a simple tableau builder. It's got a lot of things in common with tableau builders that you'll find very familiar. It's all open markets. All the markets are first come, first served. Most of them refresh. The ones that give you endgame scoring don't refresh. The ones that give you cool powers don't refresh. It takes up a lot of table space because you've got all these card markets, and then you're building up a big card space in front of you. And you've got these tokens that represent your workers, and they either have a hammer or a quill or nothing. And if they have a hammer, they can do building and laboring. If they've got a quill, they can recruit people and do something else. In Above and Below Haunted, they can exorcise the ghosts from your village, which is a new mechanism. We'll talk about that. Ghosts are going to come live in your village. But the thing that kind of sets above and below apart is that you can always take your workers, and instead of doing any of those other things, you can assign them to go on an expedition. Mechanically, what you're doing in Above and Below and Above and Below Haunted is you're exploring these underground caves. And your little guys go in there, and then they go on an expedition, and if they're successful, you get to keep the cave card, and now you can build underground buildings. And there's a marketplace for those too, and the underground buildings are just better than the above ground buildings. So you want to unlock the underground areas so you can build more of those better buildings, thus escalating your tableau. Now, I think this will leave people who love tableau builders very wanting. The tableau building is not that complex. There's not a lot of exciting synergies. You're not doing like Euro combos where you're getting all these different things and they're all paying off. You know, realistically, you are getting very minor benefits, very small bonuses, a little extra resources or access to some extra resources. The underground buildings are fundamentally, I don't think, sufficiently good enough that they really warrant committing adventurers to the expeditions. Because you need at least 2 of your villagers to go on the expedition, so you're sacrificing 2 other actions to do that. And then they may well get injured, so that takes them out of the next round. They need 2 rounds to recover. And then the rewards are rarely worthwhile. I do think if you want to be the most successful in Above and Below, and I haven't tested this theory, because I'll get to why in a minute, but I do think if you wanted to be the most successful in Above and Below, you'd probably just ignore the expeditions and the underground buildings entirely and just focus on building your tableau of above ground cards. And I think that's probably still true in Above and Below Haunted. The thing is, as a tableau builder, there are many better options. Now, there's a lot to love about the presentation of Above and Below. The art is twee, it's super cute, it's got a lot of character, it really feels like it was made with love. I love all of that. And the thing is, the expeditions are really fun. I mean, they're not super exciting. They're just tiny little vignettes, tiny little short stories, just a soupçon of flavor and not much else, you know? And my main criticism of Above and Below was that they didn't actually have an ending either. You know, you'd go on this expedition and it would be like, you find a mushroom princess in need of help. Do you help her? You know, or do you go and rummage under some nearby stones? And you're like, oh, helping her is quite difficult, but I'll try it anyway. And then you try it and you succeed. And then it's like, gain a fish. And it's like, well, but what happened with the mushroom princess? Did we get away? Like, what happened? And it would just tell you to gain a fish, right? Too often, the adventures would sort of end unsatisfactorily. Now, the reason why I haven't sat down and hammered testing the tableau building to see if you even need to bother with the underground stuff is because that's just not why I come to this game. I don't come to it to do a really like tight tableau building experience. I come to it because my partner enjoys it and we enjoy the expeditions, and we often take suboptimal actions, or what appear to be suboptimal actions, to just go and read each other short stories. And this is probably also why the game is best at 2, because one player is reading the short story, the other player is making choices, and in a 3-player game, one player is sitting on their hands while that's happening. So I don't think adding additional players really adds anything to the game. I mean, if you're looking for a chill social experience and you all just want like a really chill, sort of nice little thing to do, sure. At 3 players, totally fine. It's not going to break. It's not going to be bad. But it is not going to be better at 3 than 2. You know? And so if it's better at 2, it's only because at 3, someone's going to feel less involved. Like they have less to do. At least at 2, the other player is reading you the short story. So during the downtime, which is functionally your expedition, they at least feel like they're involved somewhat. Now, they have addressed my chief concern about the short stories in Above and Below Haunted. They give you a one-line summary or conclusion to the story, which is great because the stories are the best parts. And sometimes they're quite long. Like, Sometimes the story is literally you're attacked by a flying eyeball. You can hit it or you can run away. And it's like, I hit it. And it's like, it runs away screaming, have a mushroom. And you're like, oh, that's it. Okay,
Good story.
Great story. Great little story. And sometimes, it's much longer than that. And sometimes even 2 parts. Sometimes it's like, and do you open the mysterious bottle? And you're like, yes. And it's like, a demon flies out. And then there's even more. And it's like, now you have to do this next thing. So, and like, look, there's a whole dice system as well, where you're chucking dice to see if you can successfully achieve the choices you've made. So it's not just like pure choose your own adventure. There's also an element of dice. And some characters cannot build buildings or cannot participate in the regular actions and are only good for expeditions.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. So Haunted sort of solves the short story issue I had, where because it puts in these little conclusions. It also has this ghost system where ghosts will come and live in your village, and eventually you need to take an action to chase them all away, because if you don't, the reputation of your village diminishes and you get some points penalty at the end. It's not even that big a deal, really. There are also there's a nice new addition as well, where some of the short stories will add a global card that affects the whole game state, which is new. They didn't have this deck of story cards in the first game, so that's nice. There's also a print and play expansion, because the first game had 3 storybooks, and you could decide whether you were going to go for the regular one, the desert stories, or can't remember what the other one was. It was desert, and I want to say mountains, but I don't think it was that. But there were 3 storybooks, which was cool. This one only came with 1 storybook, but you can print out the Haunted Museum print and play expansion. So after I played this with my partner, I did go and print that off, because I thought that'd be fun to try. I still like Above and Below Haunted. I think it is a fun activity. My partner really enjoys reading the short stories. The game elements give me enough to do. I did not try very hard at this game, because it just isn't that sort of game,
Mm-hmm.
And it will depend on your crowd, right? Like, I think if I was playing against someone that was trying really hard to win this, I probably wouldn't have picked this game to play with them, because it's just not that sort of game. If they wanted to play a very competitive game, I've got so many better options that are going to reward acute competitive type play. And what I mean is, when I say competitive, I'm not talking about someone whose enjoyment of the game is wrapped up in their winning, that kind of toxic competitivity. That's not nice. I'm talking about, someone who wants to be able to really try and get into the mind of their opponent, try to optimize their points scoring, and try to, really just put their energy into maximizing what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with that style of gameplay. Some people are super into that. That's completely fine. Above and Below is not going to give them that, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And the joy of the game often comes from taking the suboptimal moves because they're more fun. That is a flaw. That is a flaw in game design, but I like this despite its flaws. And I like the little stories, and I play this with my partner, and we have a nice time with it. And I'm not at all disappointed by Haunted. As I said, I found there was a print and play thing, and I went and bought it from around Locket's site, and I was more than happy to do that. So, if you liked Above and Below, this is more of the same. They've got some nice little additions. There's some boats now that let you adjust your dice when you're on the adventure, so that can feel a little less swingy, which is nice. There is obviously all new stories. I think they're slightly better, which is nice. And there's the weird ghost mechanism, which kind of looks like it could be feel bad, because when you chase all the ghosts out of your village, they go and one of them goes and lives in your opponent's village, but it's easy. It's not a big deal. Like, the ghosts are never that feel bad, really. So,
okay.
Just a pleasant sort of more Above and Below. That's it.
Well, I've never played a Ryan Lockett game apart from 8 Minute Empire with you 15 years ago or something. And I know he's obviously done loads, so I've no real context for how his games go.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Above and Below, I mean, he's sort of played around with this idea of storytelling and Euro mechanisms married together. Above and Below, I think, I want to say the first attempt, but I don't know that for sure. And then he evolved into the triptych, which is
Islebound, Near and Far.
No, so sorry. I think near and far is. I think the triptych I'm actually thinking of is above and below, near and far, and now and never. So yeah, I think so. Near and far and now and never were sort of evolutions of this idea. But what they did was they got rid of the whole tableau village building thing, and they made you adventurers, and you were sort of managing these adventures. But I didn't play now and never because I wasn't a huge fan of near and far. I do think it worked better as a 2-player campaign game, but it still had this issue, the same issues Destiny's had, which was that it was a story-driven game, driven mainly by the story rather than the mechanisms. Because it was competitive, someone would just not finish their story, and it would just end very unsatisfyingly for one player. So that's what, and Near and Far could be played as a campaign game. I didn't really engage with that side of it. We played it as one-offs, but the one-offs would, again, often, like I remember winning Near and Far, but I had an ongoing story thing I was trying to do. And because my opponent ended the game, I actually never got to finish the story thing I was doing in that particular session. And so even though I won, didn't have a good time because I was like, well, I don't care about the points. I just want to know how the story turned out. This is an ongoing issue with story-driven games and sort of hybridizing them with Euro-type games or dungeon crawler-type games and that sort of thing. And I applaud Ryan Lockett for trying to do it. But he's done it most successfully, I think, in Sleeping Gods, which is primarily focused on the story. Obviously, it's a campaign game. It's much longer than the campaign mode for Near and Far, I think. I don't know about Now and Never. Above and Below, obviously not a campaign game, just sessions. And stories very short.
Well, the rating for Above and Below Haunted pushes it a good half point up from the original, so I presume people were happy with the additions and changes.
Yep, and I don't imagine that there's a lot of people buying it that tried the original and were like, oh, this is terrible, and then we're like, oh, maybe this will fix my concerns. I think probably the people playing Haunted are the ones who liked Above and Below.
Yeah,
I do think if you've played neither, then Haunted, just get Haunted. There's no reason to go back and get Above and Below. The only reason at this stage, I think, would be we've played Haunted so much, we've exhausted all of the stories and we're ready for more stories. But, that feels implausible. I envy the people that have that much time for gaming. Anyway, I'm happy with it. I printed the print and play expansion, so yeah, pleased with Above and Below Haunted, albeit, with all the things I mentioned about it. But it is a lovely presentation. A big table hog, though. Lots of cards on the table.
Fun.
And so now we'll move from a Kickstarter of a second edition of an older game to a Kickstarter of a third edition of an older game. So this is the new Kickstarter. We're going to talk about, I played Colosseum. I played the 2017 version of Colosseum, the Emperor Edition, which was crowdfunded by Tasty Minstrel Games. Back in 2016 or something, they ran the campaign. They delivered on it around 2017. And this was, at the time, this sort of all-in reprint of the 2007 game Colosseum. And this is a design by Wolfgang Kramer, who, worked on all those games with Michael Kiesling, as well as working on El Grande and Renature, and Markus Lübke, who's done Colosseum and one other game called Stern Samler that came out in 2007 and disappeared with the Sands of Time. So there is a new edition of this coming out from Fantasia Games. You will know Fantasia Games from Endless Winter Paleo Americans and Unconscious Mind. The artists for the version I played, which is the Tasty Minstrel Games version, and we could talk about the art in a bit, but the artists are Jackie Davis, who worked on a bunch of the Stonemaier games, so Euphoria and Viticulture, and also did Cubitos. And Daniel Solis, who worked on Aeon's End Legacy and Path of Light and Shadow. amongst others. So two quite experienced board game artists. The publisher was, of course, TMG, Tasty Minstrel Games. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
And the player count of this edition is 3 to 5 players. It is a 60 to 90 minute game, which is a heck and lie that is highly dependent on your player count and also the amount of table talk your table wants to engage in, which we'll get to. So, Colosseum is functionally a game where you're playing as Roman nobles who are putting on shows at their own private arenas. So you own a Colosseum somewhere in Rome or in Italy. And you are putting on your shows and you want to have the best show. So the game takes place over the course of 5 rounds, and in each round, what you're going to do is you're going to get the opportunity to buy something of real importance. This could be the show that you're going to put on. It could also be an upgrade to your arena. These are the main things. And then you'll go into an auction round where you're going to bid your money, your precious money. It's the only resource in the game unless you count assets, which we'll talk about later. But everything is being purchased with money, and you will bid your money to buy more assets. Then you will go into a trading phase where people can trade freely all the assets. Well, no, you only trade with the active player. So we go around the table in turn order. Everyone gets a chance to trade, but of course you can just shout at other people. It's not like you have to shut up when it's the active player's turn or whatever. Anyway, so there's going to be some free market trading, and then we're going to go into putting on your shows, and then we're going to do some cleanup and reset and do it all again 5 times. And what's kind of unique about the game is you're fundamentally trying to complete these complex contracts, right? Which are the shows. So you'll get a show tile and it'll be like, you're putting on, the Christians versus the Lions. And then you have to get the assets required for that show, which will be like, 5 lions and 3 gladiators and 2 ships, And once you've got all the assets, then in the show phase, you can spend those assets to put the show on. Now, you don't need everything. If you don't have enough assets, you can still put on the show, but it will just be worth less points. And the reason this is important is because your score at the end of the game is only equal to the best show you put on. So every time you put on a show, you total up its total points value, and then you get that many points. And then when you put on future shows, if they don't earn as many points, you simply don't get the points. And if they earn more, you only increase by the difference. So you've got five opportunities to score, but only the one highest opportunity counts, which is interesting. It's still the case that what tends to happen is everybody is trying to put on one big show at the end. Mm-hmm. And to an extent, I suppose, if you were to go for a strategy where you were going to try and not put your biggest show on at the end of the game, you'd have to be actively playing Saboteur to prevent other people. Because the other thing is, the points you get from the show is also your income. So you don't want to you're incentivized to put on shows even when they're not as good as your biggest show, because you still need money. And you're only going to get that money by putting on shows. But there's all these ways to improve your total show's appeal. It's ticket sales, right? You're doing ticket sales. Mm-hmm. And the ticket sales are equal to your points, and they're also equal to your money at the end of the round. And so you can also increase your ticket sales through numerous little improvements you can make, one of which is put on shows. Because every time you put a show on, you flip it over, and now it adds to your ticket sales because you've got some reputation for having at least put on a show. And so if you can develop a little set of shows you've successfully completed, you might get plus 10 or 20 to a future production, which is significant. You can also put on the same show again, which is helpful because you have all the assets, right? When you use the assets to put on the show, you don't lose them, you lose one. The idea is that something has been lost. Probably a gladiator was eaten by one of the lions, or maybe one of the sets was destroyed by the ocean scene you put on with all the ships. So you have to discard one asset, and then you keep the others. So feasibly, you could put on the same show again by just getting one more of the same asset. And then, but what would happen is you'd have to reset it. So you'd lose that bonus for having put it on before, but at the same time, you can easily do it. You don't need to acquire anything new. There are so many ways in the game to upgrade your situation. You can upgrade your arena. You can make your arena bigger. You can add little podiums to it. The other thing is the person who put on the best show each round gets a little prize podium, which is worth extra ticket sales. This has a lot of flavor of a classic Euro, right? There is no hidden information. There's no hidden scoring. Everything's completely determinable and open. And I mean, I sat down to play this with my Eurogame group, and immediately they all wanted to know what were the because the assets live in a bag, right? And what we do is we create lots for the auction. So we pull 3 assets from the bag, and that's a lot. So you might bid on a gladiator, a cage, and a ship, right? Or you might bid on a comedian and some set dressing and a cage, you know? And maybe you only want the cage because you need it for the lions, but you get the comedian and the ship because they're included. And then someone else just wants the ship, and now you're bidding against each other. And immediately my group was like, what is the distribution of tiles in the bag? So that's the kind of group I'm playing with, right? And that does not lead to a 90-minute game. This information is entirely open. It's entirely deterministic. There's only one really random element to the game. Of course, the tiles that come out the bag are random, you know, and to an extent, the way the auction round works is there's quite a lot of auctioning, and the offerings will be refilled over the course of the auction multiple times. So you might sort of hedge your bets and hold your money, hoping that somebody else will win an offering, and when it's refilled, you'll see something you want. But based on your position in turn order, you could lose your opportunity to bid at all, which would be really bad because you need to build up your assets to put on bigger shows to get better scores. However, the biggest random element of the game is right before you do your performance, you roll 2 dice and you move the influential Roman figures. So there's senators, there's the emperor, and they just move around a track, and the track goes through your arena. So you're just moving little guys along the arena or along the track, and you want them to stop in your arena specifically. And if you roll the right numbers, you can get massive benefits. And if you don't, you could just be screwed. And so in a game that is otherwise wholly deterministic, this feels like a really odd mechanism. And what you can do is also use one. So you get these advanced upgrades. I spoke about them earlier, or advanced purchases once per round. You can get a second. I won't get into the nitty gritty of it. Just, you know, for you people out there, yeah, I know you can buy 2 sometimes, and I know how you get them, but it doesn't matter, does it? The point is, you by default get 1, and it's really a really important purchase because what you can buy with this purchase are significant upgrades or shows. And if you don't have the shows, you can't win. So you need to buy the shows, but you also need the other things as well to help you out. And shows are expensive. So there's a real dilemma there. Anyway, one of the things you can buy in that upgrade phase is a podium that lets you roll 2 dice. And then you can move 2 figures or 1 figure further. And it feels really, really weirdly random in a game that is otherwise completely deterministic and open information. And obviously determinism is relative. Like, this game has got a massive amount of player interaction because the trading and the auctions are hugely influential and a major part of the game. And that's why I said the game is, 60 to 90 minutes, highly dependent on your table. Like, I'm playing with a table that want to know the distribution of tiles in the bag. And when it comes to the trading, there was a lot of negotiation. And the rulebook kind of acknowledges that it is just a free market and there's not really any sort of major restrictions, and it just is what it is. But the value of things is so quantifiable because you can see what everybody's using everything for, and it's not that hard to work out what they're trying to do and what they need, and you can work out whether they're going to get more points than you. Additionally, whoever has the most of a specific asset gets another bonus. So you can work out who's got those bonuses. Do you want them to have it? Everyone's scores are tracked on a victory point tracker, so you can see who's winning and deny them those things. So it almost feels like the information is too open and too apparent to facilitate interesting trades. Having said that, you have to participate in the trading. You kind of have to do it, or else you're not going to be able to put on the big shows and win the game because you're just not going to have what you need. Anyway, it took at least 3 hours.
Okay.
So we did play 5, which is the maximum player count. We had a few people that hadn't played before, but everyone who was there is a very sort of, deep in the hobby person. So, very across the rules, very quick to pick things up, immediately thinking about token distribution and what is and isn't a good trade and, using all those kinds of techniques. And I will give credit to the person who won the game. They made the most effort to work out and calculate how to do things efficiently and make efficient trades and hold on to value and how to get the most value out of things. It was a fun experience, but it was quite apparent, I think, even before the game was over, sort of who was going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most influential factor up to that, and there wasn't a lot we could do about it in terms of player agency. Like, we could just not trade with that person, but nobody wanted to be the one that would start, an embargo because they would suffer, and if anyone else didn't keep to the embargo, then it was pointless anyway, and you're just going to lose. So I didn't feel like we had a lot of agency over stopping that person from winning. And ultimately also, it felt like the dice rolls and the position of the senators and the counselors and the emperor were hugely influential. And there was not really anything you could do about that either. The problem being that they just move around in a circle. And so the only way to keep them away from the person who was winning was to keep them on the other side of the circle. They can't really move backwards. Yes, I know you can move them backwards sometimes, but they don't really move backwards. And so we just kind of had to hold them away from the person that was winning if we could. But that just meant the person who was before them on the circle would also suffer, which was me. Sort of. But I got into a tug of war with somebody else who was between me and the winner because I was trying to keep them back away from the winner in my area. And then the other person was trying to move them into their area. But then in the end, they skipped right over me, jumped over the next player and went right back to the winner. So it didn't really help anyone. But I got really unlucky on those dice rolls as well, which again, I wouldn't have minded, but I did invest in the thing to get 2 dice. Anyway, it's a really interesting game. I'm not sure I'm going to keep it because I feel like it's not doing anything that Sidereal Confluence isn't doing, and I much prefer Sidereal Confluence. Now, thematically, Sidereal is a wildly different game. It is space, crazy space, mad tableau building, but it is a game with auctions, and it is a game with trading, and it's better at trading. The trading is more interesting. The trading is more fun. I also don't think it's actually substantially longer, but it is much more complex. And that's one of the reasons why the trading is better, because it's not as deterministic. You can't really you can get the vibes of what everyone else is trying to do. You can get the vibes of what things are worth to them. In Sidereal, in this, you can definitively calculate it fundamentally. Yep. And that means that competitive players are incentivized to sit down and do a lot of math to work things out, which I think is not great. Not great for the pacing. And, you don't have to do it, but it is a competitive game. And some people get their enjoyment out of that, and that's completely fine. And I've seen people try to do it with Sidereal as well, but there's a problem in that in Sidereal, what's interesting is the trading is simultaneous. So everyone's shouting across the table, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. Now, there is no real-time element to Sidereal, but it feels like real-time because everyone's trading simultaneously and shouting simultaneously. It's wild how that lack of structure creates a sense of urgency. It's kind of magical, actually. Because I don't know, I can't tell you why it does that. It just does. Every time we get to the trading phase, people are immediately like, right, I need these things. I've got these things. What have you got? I want that over there. It becomes like a flea market. It feels like that. It's crazy. Whereas the trading in Colosseum is more structured because you can only trade with the person whose turn it is. And you go round the table in turn order trying to reach a negotiation. And then when you don't, and this has two problems. One, it's slower, so it takes longer to resolve. And two, it means that people have time to sit there and work out exactly what everything's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't feel a sense of urgency, so they're happy to sit and do the calculations every time a trade proposal comes up. Now, you might be like, well, I don't want to do that. My group wouldn't do that. Maybe, and fine. Maybe this is a good game for your group. But I'm conscious that I wouldn't be comfortable sitting and tell people like, hey, if we want to get this done in a reasonable amount of time and we don't want it to become math, don't be super competitive about it. Like, I'm not going to tell people that, and it's also, I think that's a flaw of the design rather than the players. Players are going to be what players are going to be, And so I think that the trade, they needed some amount of hidden information, either with the value of goods, to obfuscate the trading. I don't know why it couldn't be simultaneous. I think that would have been better. It also says in the rulebook, like the trades or rather, actually what it explicitly says in the rulebook is you can't make future promises, which is just a really weird thing to write. Because if I say, hey, when I'm the active player, I'll trade you this for that. What, I can't do that? I'm not allowed to do that? And so it's like, it's bizarre. And then it also says like, don't spend too long on the trading in the rulebook. It just says that. So they're kind of aware that the trading is not a very well-structured sequence of the game, but also really important. And I feel like they needed to work out that part of it. I feel like they are conscious of this because they've made a number of changes in the new edition that's currently on crowdfunding, which is called Colosseum, the Grand Spectacle. And it looks like pretty much all the components are the same. Obviously, it's Fantasia. If you've seen Endless Winter, if you've seen Unconscious Mind, you'll know it's going to be a gorgeous production with awesome art. There was a complaint and I spoke about the artists earlier, there was a complaint that the Tasty Minstrel Games version was not as pretty as the 2007 version. And that's hugely subjective. Like, neither are non-functional. It's not like there was icon issues or graphical issues or anything like that, or usability issues. It was the Tasty Minstrel Games version was a bit more cartoony, and the original version was more sort of classic Roman kind of realism. And they've gone back to that art style. Fantasia have gone back to that art style, albeit sort of some kind of hybrid, really, because although the box art looks incredibly realistic, the actual character design, is it the Miko? It looks like the Miko. It is. It's the Miko and Ian O'Toole. So if you've seen any of the Garfield Games art, you'll know the Miko's art. The Ian O'Toole, of course, will probably be doing the graphic design and the layouts and things. So it's going to be great. It's going to be a great production. I have no doubt the play pieces that they've put up are washed and they look really nice. So if you like the game, this is going to be a wonderful addition. And it's also like not outrageously expensive. Take
it back.
Take it back. So the core game is €69, and that's actually 2 games. They've thrown in this card game they've designed with every copy. I don't know anything about that, so I can't really speak about it. Impresario, it's called. It's designed by Wolfgang Kramer and Johnny Pack, both obviously very established designers. Johnny Pack, of course, known for working on Unconscious Mind and developing Endless Winter, I think. And also the Coloma. Coloma was another one Johnny Pack worked on. So, they could be good. But €69 is slightly more than I'd want to pay for a mid-weight Euro game. But, this is a gorgeous production. It's obviously got a second game in there. It also comes with the digital soundtrack. They've put a picture of a CD in the pledge picture, but I don't think you're getting a CD.
A CD? CD? What is this, the 2007 version?
And then you can get the fancier edition with the 6th player expansion, and there's metal coins and all that kind of stuff. But they've gone some way to addressing some of the issues that I've raised here. They've tried to streamline, so you can play the exact same version I played with this game. They've included the original rules, so you can do that. You can also play their new refined version of it, which goes from 5 rounds to 4 rounds. They say they've streamlined it, they've expanded the economy a bit to make that, progress faster. They've added in more star performers. I'm not going to explain that. That either means something or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't matter. But what they've done as well is they've changed the dice system, where previously, you had to buy that upgrade to roll 2 dice and stuff like that. Now you always roll 2 dice and you can divide up the movement more dynamically. So they're trying to fix that dice system, which I think is a good thing. I don't think it was great the way it worked before. I think it was kind of necessary to add some amount of unpredictability to the game, because it definitely sat in a weird space where it almost felt like a classic Euro game, but then it's got all this trading and all this auctioning, which is fine, but then the information is deterministic like a classic Euro. But then I think what it wanted was probably some kind of hidden scoring to obfuscate some of the value of things, rather than a random track which just seems to give out points for some reason. I don't really understand the value of that track necessarily. So anything they've done to improve that, I think, is welcome. So I do think it'll be a really gorgeous production. And I do think the game is good. Like, I'm not unwilling to play it again, but if we have 3 hours or 4 hours and 5 players, I'm always going to pick Sidereal. Maybe this works better at lower counts than Sidereal does. I wouldn't be surprised. The version I have doesn't go below 3. They've said they're adding a solo mode and a 2-player mode. I don't know why you'd be interested in that, but maybe you love Ancient Rome. I don't know. What do you think, Barry?
Yeah, so, I was kind of following along and looking at some of the changes they've made to see, how they fixed it. So they have done, made some inroads to the complaints you had, I would argue, with this new version. The tile distribution is different in the new version. You'll need to know that if you're playing it again. Now there's 24 gladiators, 12 of everything else, apart from 6 jokers, 6 emperors. But where you're saying they've included the components for the old version, they also give you 4 special tiles that are not used in the new version to use with the rules that you played. Which is interesting. But I'm having a look, and like what you're saying about 1 and 2 players, sure, like any negotiation game, any auction games are very difficult to achieve at low player counts. Like so many put the threshold at 3 at the bottom end. They've included the 6th player now. They just unlocked the 6th player as part of the campaign. If it's already kind of dragging a little, does a 6th player but minus 1 round balance out, or does that make, does it not make it still good? I don't know. I've not played this game. Actually, that's not true. Or it is true. I don't remember playing this game. I do remember seeing this game, and I can't remember if I played it or was just sitting for a while watching it. And I think it was the latter, because I feel like I would remember the game if I played the full thing. And the new version was at Expo this year. I don't know if you saw it there at all.
No.
I didn't sit down and look at that. I didn't see it actually, so I don't know. But it doesn't sound necessarily the kind of thing I'd jump into. Negotiation games where you're kind of out for yourself and trying to get a good deal is not so bad. But I feel like negotiation games do tend to drag for me, because you can always get somebody as well that's just so obstinate that they're not going to do any trading. You couldn't really get away with that in this game, I would assume.
You would, I think, if you were the kind of person who doesn't want to trade because you never think you're getting a good value trade, that sort of player, or a player who's just simply quiet and doesn't like to speak up and get involved, I think you would do better in Colosseum than you would do in Sidereal. In Sidereal, you would be completely out of the game.
But yes, I just flicking through the campaign. It looks nice. You were saying people were complaining about the TMG game and the looks of that compared to the original. There's already people complaining about Eno tools, boards, and stuff on the forums there. So, like you say, you can't please everybody, but to my mind, it looks proper, shall we say. It has gone back to that more beige overtones of a classic Euro game with the design
Mm-hmm.
and the tokens and everything.
Yeah, they've gone. It's slightly beiger than the TMG version, less beige than the OG version.
Modern shade.
But yeah, I mean, I think like subjectively everyone will have an opinion on the art. I don't think any one of these is massively better or worse than the others. I think they're all decent productions. I'm perfectly happy with my TMG version. It came with some really nice components as well because it was kickstarted, although I actually bought it at retail after the campaign. I got the Kickstarter edition. I'm not sure if there was a retail edition. And it's, I think the thing is, it's a 4 or 5 player game. You could play 6. Yep. I think it would not be better. You could play 3. I think it would not be necessarily better at 3 either. I can't imagine how the 2 or 1 player versions are going to work, but I feel like they're going to be some vague version of the game that uses the same components,
Mm-hmm.
A 2 player version, I don't know how that will work, and, I mean, again, a 1 player version of a trading and auctioning game seems crazy. I'm sure it's been done. I don't think if you're purely a solo gamer, this would be a game that you should necessarily look at, unless someone's created an incredible solo game using the components from a multiplayer game.
Yeah, I mean, there could even be a deck of Automa that tells you what is willing to trade with you, what is willing to pay for your goods that you may have spare, things along those lines. I'm sure there's ways of doing it. I just don't know if it facilitates the same feel as you would having to negotiate with an opponent. It's almost like having a fixed market, even if that market varies turn on turn.
Yeah.
But yeah, like anything's possible.
Anyway, I had a decent time with it, but I'm not sure I'd ever pick it up over Sidereal, and I'm not sure if I'm actually particularly interested in going back to it. Having said that, I don't regret my time with it either.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Colosseum. Anyway, available currently for backing on GameFound. Actually, no, it's not. That will have ended about a week ago when you see this, but it will be available for late pledge at some stage.
No doubt. We interrupt your regularly scheduled podcast for breaking news.
Yep, we were recording and we just noticed that Tycoon Games, who was mentioned previously on an episode as having bought the rights to the Eric Lang trilogy of games from Simon, that is Blood Rage, which we already discussed in the news. Oh God, where am I putting this in the episode? I guess I'll keep it where it is because it's less editing work.
As it happens.
As it happens, exactly. So we were just about to go into our big section on Revive, and now we're going to be talking about more Blood Rage. And we already talked about the Eric Lang already with Chaos in the Old World. And now Tycoon Games, of course, bought Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and Ankh, which are the triptych of games from Eric Lang, the trilogy of games from Eric Lang. And now they have announced their reprint campaign, which we sort of knew was coming. We weren't quite sure what they were planning to do with it. They are announcing Blood Rage Valhalla, a standalone sequel. It says, in the events of Blood Rage, the world was destroyed by Ragnarok, but the battle will continue. Eternal combat in Valhalla. And it is apparently well known that Eric Lang has been working on this design and a sequel to Blood Rage. So he is involved and committed to this. Alongside the sequel reprint standalone game, there will be a reprint of the original trilogy, which will be repackaged and remastered.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Top questions about whether or not the previously Kickstarter exclusive items for each of the campaigns will become available again. Very difficult to get a hold of, particularly the Rising Sun and Blood Rage items, the extra pieces and models that came with both of those. I don't think I would be super mad, even if I was the owner of the previous exclusive ones, if new ones came, but I'm sure people will love to complain that they're not upholding Simon's promised to be Kickstarter exclusive forever and ever.
So I have all 3 of these games.
Mm-hmm.
I really like all 3 of these games. I have all the Kickstarter exclusive stuff for all 3 of these games, which I bought through the crowdfunding campaigns. I would not be upset if they decided to reprint all the exclusives. I was not angry at Simon when they did it for Blood Rage, which they got around by reprinting with different sculpts, which I appreciate their commitment to not violating this concept of exclusivity, but I don't like Kickstarter exclusive gameplay. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't like it. If you're going to have Kickstarter exclusives, make it alternate art, alternate designs, stuff like that. I like that much better. I do not like gatekeeping gameplay content generally. So I'm more than happy for them to reprint all of this stuff. My hope is that if they offer new gameplay for these games, they make it available at through a reasonable channel for people like me who already own it all.
Yes, don't add something that only comes when you buy the whole thing again.
I don't want to have to rebuy a bunch of stuff. Also, they should email me because they do not need to reprint the Pantheon expansion for Ankh. Just don't do it. It's only worse for the game. Just let that die with, whatever happened to Simon.
Well, how do you feel about the increasing number of campaigns that require you to give them $1 before they start in order to get something exclusive?
Yeah, I don't like that either.
This campaign also does. Yeah, I don't like that either. I mean, I don't hate it if you offer it for $5 later on, right? I can cope with that. If somebody signs up, you get your follower count up, that gives you the impetus of when to launch, and then you reward those people that keep up with the news by listening to sweet podcasts like this and back you for $1, as long as you don't lock it out once it's live, once it's there for people to actually get on board with, because it's so hard to keep up with everything.
Well, to be fair, this is some kind of monster or figure for Blood Rage. Blood Rage Valhalla. Obviously, we don't know anything about the game. Is it Blood Rage? How much of DNA does it have in common with Blood Rage? But there is a character called Modgudir who will be £15 at some point, but now you can get it for $1. Sorry, $15. Now you can get it for $1. So, I don't mind that if it is available later for $15 and ideally also available at retail. But, again, what I dislike most about these practices is not necessarily this leveraging of hype, which I'm not a fan of, but it's the fact that when you start piecemealing these things out, you create a lot more waste. If you put all of your figures in one box, it's definitely going to be less wasteful than creating 15 boxes, because you need to be able to divvy them up from the people that didn't get everything, and you need to be able to plan for some kind of retail release with 5 different boxes to sell. I know why as a business it makes sense. I know why as a retail entity it makes sense, but it's incredibly wasteful. And I do applaud campaigns like Unconscious Mind that offer a big box solution and the option to package everything in it. I think that that's great. I think everyone should be doing that, because I don't want to have all these boxes that I just throw out and is just a huge waste of, materials. It just feels wasteful. I don't like it.
Isle of Cats was the worst. They all in Kickstarter. It was just a stack of boxes as tall as me to go in the bin by the time you put it all in the main box.
Yep. I mean, I guess I had some light reprieve from that because I bought all of Isle of Cats sequentially over the course of 3 Kickstarters, I think. But yeah. Anyway, if you are interested in Blood Rage Valhalla, right now you can go and find it on GameFound, and you can spend $1 to get Mulgadir, which will save you $14 in the long run if you're going to back, or otherwise it'll be a waste of $1. But that's up to you to decide. Anyway, personally, I like Blood Rage. I like Chaos in the Old World. I like Cthulhu Wars, even though it's a different designer. It's kind of the same game. So I'm happy to see more of this sort of thing. Hopefully, it's a cool standalone game that offers new and interesting experiences and not a cheap cash. But I have faith. I mean, I don't know much about. I mean, Tycoon games. They've got a broad catalog, but I can't imagine Eric Lang would return to this if he didn't have something interesting to do with it. Oh yeah, the other thing I'd like to say, actually, sorry, is if they do decide to rebalance the games, there's a lot of people asking if they're going to rebalance Rising Sun. I've not observed balance issues in Rising Sun. Doesn't mean they don't exist. I've played a bunch of it. It is a wild ride. Is it unbalanced? I don't know. It's a negotiation game. It's a diplomacy game. Whatever balance issues might have existed have come out in the wash of players ganging up on each other, in my experience. But there seems to be enough people who have not had that experience that maybe a remastered edition would be a good thing. If they do something like that, update packs, please. Make that stuff available. Make it easy to access. Put out free print and play versions as well, please. Just because that's the right thing to do.
Oh, and I was saying, like, what do you think of the decision to reprint all 3 games at the same time? They could have eked that out, campaign after campaign after campaign.
It's a bold decision, Cotton.
Yeah. I'm in. Like, get what you want up front,
Sure. I think if it weren't for the term remastered, I wouldn't have a problem. But if the intention is to go back and start rebalancing things, now they do have a lot of community feedback because these games have been out for a while. So maybe they don't need to do any development work or anything like that. But I suppose it would probably be a little safer to invest in rebalancing and remastering a little more slowly. It does seem like an awful lot to incorporate into one big campaign. Having said that, the data's been out there for a while. Maybe Eric Lang's been talking to Tabletop Tycoon about this for a while. I don't know. So I don't know much about the company, if I'm honest. I've only heard sort of vague stuff from the industry that I don't want to repeat here because it's unfounded and I can't cite my sources. So anyway, I'm hoping for the best. I was not sure Eric Lang would work on this, so I'm pleased to see that he has returned to it. And I'm pleased that it's all available again. Like I said, I'm pleased that it's all available again fundamentally. So, I'm happy for that to be out. I like these games. I'm happy for more people to own them so that I can just sit down and play them and I don't have to teach them and, we can just get on with it. They're great.
All right, let's get back to it. So as mentioned at the top of the episode, I'm going to be talking a bit about, we're both going to be talking hopefully, a bit about Revive. So this is a game published by Aporta Games. Has 4 designers. That's Helga Meissner, Christian Ostby, Eilif Svensson and Anna Vermland. And comes with a variety of artists. Also, the cover, I believe, done by Germund Bohn, but also worked on by Martin Mottet, Dan Roth, and Jesse Tupfer. Assuming my O with umlauts is pronounced correctly. So we spoke about this previously on podcast 29, around about the 45-minute mark, if you wish to check that out. But it has been on the list for playing for a while, particularly with what Mike said, the sequel of sorts, at least a spiritual sequel or follow-up game, Recall, announced by the same designers and should be available at Essen this year. I don't know if you're planning on checking out the booth as you swing by, Mike.
I'll definitely check out Recall at Essen this year if I have a chance.
Nice.
I'll be looking to make a chance to do that. So if I don't get to do it, it's because demand is too high or something like that.
Or other things have happened. It's a big conference, Essen. A lot going on.
The biggest, actually, as it turns out.
Indeed. For those who don't know, Revive is a 1 to 4 player engine building exploration game with network building rules, some small tech trees on your player board, and some light deck building elements. This all comes together with variable objective scoring, variable faction powers, and randomised map tile placement to make a game with a multiplicity of options for the players, but condenses these choices into a manageable miscellany of actions and strategies for the players to choose from. The overall premise of the game, and I'll be honest, the narrative's a little light, but the premise of the game is that each of us is a faction returning to the surface of the Earth 5,000 years after it was destroyed, with the aim of exploring, finding ancient technologies, repopulating the surface, and sharing that surface with the other factions who are emerging. So this isn't necessarily the kind of combative game that Blood Rage or something might be, a little more friendly. Within the game, this story is told through a short 5-game campaign where different elements of the game are unlocked until you have the full thing. We didn't bother with any of that, straight into the full thing. So the game plays out, players have take turns, take 2 actions on their turn, and those actions can be to play one of 3 different colours of cards and one of 4, possibly later 5 slots for the top or bottom effect. And this will usually be to gather resources, but as your engine improves, the slots that you're putting the cards into get better themselves, and you'll get those bonuses by using a card that matches the colour of the upgrades in those slots. As those slots fill up, you'll have to take some point the hibernate action, that is a refresh action, to trade out all the cards that you've played for all the cards in your discard pile, as well as refreshing the state of your board. The resources that you earn, you can spend on exploring nearby tiles, earning rewards, gaining new cards, and these cards represent the citizens of your civilization. This is from an open market. And it gives you some control over the terrain that's revealed and the cards in your deck. You could also spend resources as an action to send the meeples on your board to live on a city hex on the map. That learns you new technologies, scores you points. Or resources can be spent as an action to build factories, small and large factories, which exploit the nearby terrain to advance along technology tracks, powering parts of your engine and unlocking machines. As you move along these machine tracks, you use your faction's special power. You unlock additional abilities. That'll be more fast actions to spend on your machines. You can earn artifacts, of which there's a limited number, and they serve as both the end game condition and multipliers for your personal objective card scoring. And once that last artifact is removed, that player gets a 4-point token, finishes their turn, and then every other player gets one more turn. The winner, whoever has the most points. So Mike and I played a couple of games at least on Board Game Arena, and I have played a few other games as well to try and really get a reasonable handle on it. So yeah, I played this now 3-player, 4-player with Mike, and I've played about half a dozen games at 2 players, both with and without the expansion. And the game is this engine builder and all the other things that I just mentioned: resource gathering, tech tree building, putting things out on the board. And so one of from my plays, my scores have varied wildly, right? I've gone from 50 points to 180 points, right? And it's functionally the same game I've played each time, but I've got a little better and I've had the right kind of combinations. My engine's been better along those. So one of the first things I wanted to consider is the amount of randomness within this game. So one of the first things I want to consider about the game is the randomness, or the random element to the game. At setup, there's 4 large city objective scoring tiles laid out in the corner of the map, and all the players start in the middle. Then, within the official variant, and once you've played a game, all players are dealt 2 objective scoring cards, from which they choose one immediately. But not all cities are equal in terms of their scoring potential, and not all combinations of objective cards are equal. So for whatever other randomness is going on at the game, there's a lot up front that you have to immediately strategize for and hope to potentially hit a jackpot. So each objective card has 3 scoring conditions, and each of which you can multiply the points for collecting artifacts of the matching colour. So I mentioned artifacts are the endgame trigger and objective multiplier. There's 3 colours, white, purple, orange, but they just refer, they're just useful for objective 1, 2, 3 on your scoring card. But identifying this and gaining those is crucial, as competing for the artifacts is one of the sort of few ways there's actually any notable player versus player tension in the game. But some of these objectives have, I think I just said there, a greater scoring potential and or are far easier to obtain through the course of the game through incidental actions rather than having to actually work towards earning those points. So as an example, one of the large city scoring tiles gives you 2 points for every lightning resource you earn. Lightning is a refreshable, non-expendable resource you use to trigger the machines in your empire, and getting that objective has never scored me fewer than 12 points. And that is just, it's almost exclusively from what you earn during the game. The game gives you lightning because you need them to power your machines. You get that just by playing, and so getting to that tile to score the 12 points is super straightforward, almost a given if it's on the board. An even higher potential for that, because as you flip tiles and reveal them, you can earn lightning from the map tiles on the board, and so actually your upper bound there is probably closer to 18 or 20 points if you really wanted to push for it. But other than having to get to that city to score it, there's no additional requirement to scoring that objective. If you compare this to another large city that rewards you for building meeples and factories on different tiles within the map, and that requires you to that has a networking cost, right? So building separate from your existing network costs you food, or costs you a machine activation or whatever you're using to kind of get around that kind of placement restriction, and it has a maximum score of 12 points. And that is if every single one of your buildings and meeples is on a different tile. And that is a much harder ask than doing something you're doing anyway for that reward. Now, everybody can see that at the start, right? And everybody can work towards the lightning rather than work towards the map area. But, similarly, other objectives require you to play a more restrictive game or cost more for doing it, and some just give you the points for doing something. And when you couple this with your personal objective card, which may also have a point for every lightning, a point for using your faction special ability, a point for gaining a card, something like that, it can either play into your strengths and play into what's already available, or it can require you to diversify in a way where you're never going to get as many points as you would doubling down on the same condition for another player. And that can end up meaning you can have very unfair combinations for one player versus another right from the start. And you wouldn't know that the objectives are secret, but you would know that they exist, and you would think if you've not got them, another player at the table probably has, and you're already on the back foot for that. So identifying this does become part of the game, right? But your first few games may feel very lopsided through no fault of the players, just almost by luck. As you get better, you can look for those opportunities. Certainly, I'm now taking the cards that I feel play into the big city objectives and play into what I want to do within the game. But the element of randomness can fundamentally affect the balance of the game. So it's not a short game. You're probably at 4 players, half an hour per player, very least in real life.
At the very least.
Yeah, and so playing for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and only really knowing you're at a disadvantage at the very end is, I'd say, a negative for the game, potentially. It's not always been the defining factor of the game, and in fact I wouldn't say it's ever really been the defining factor of the game, but it's hard to know because there is all these different layers of randomness that go into it, and so you can't definitively say, oh, I had the bad objectives, I had the worst setup, I had the worst starting position, whatever, or player order with that. And so I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any luck in games, right? It's crucial. I'm rereading the Player of Games, the Ian M. Banks culture novel right now, which makes this point very early on that only a fool would say a game should have no luck, so that all those chess players can go do one. And the game does allow for a degree of mitigation for this. Like, say, you get 2 objective cards to choose from. It envelops the game in, the variety of tile placement, the card market, the machine market, the module market, the crate tokens that you can earn that give you random resources, such that a stronger player can still make better plays, but do be aware that you might be at a disadvantage from another player through no fault of your own. In the words of Jean-Luc Picard, it's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness, that is life. So I don't know how you found the randomness of the game in the couple of times that you've played recently, Mike, but did you feel like you didn't have anything that tied up, or that didn't have what you wanted going into the game, or that you felt you had to spread yourself too thin to meet some of those objectives?
So I think that what I will observe, so I do think that I think that there's a few things, like we mentioned sort of randomness, and there is randomness in the game in the sense that there are 3 marketplaces all offering upgrades to your game state. And the stuff that comes out in those marketplaces is random. I've had, in our last game, I had a little bit of bad luck with the card market, but I've not generally found those markets to be particularly punishing one way or the other. I think that a much bigger concern is a strong term, but I do think there's a lot of randomness in the setup that can be very consequential, and also doesn't offer a lot of really good low-level heuristics. So I think what I mean by that is you get your 2 objective cards, which are these menus Barry described, and you pick one. You've got the 4 large locations, which are in-game scoring conditions that you can access on the game board. But if you have access to 2, you've done really well. Often people will struggle to even get 1. And those are random, and then your faction is random. And your faction's ability to play into the objective cards you've been dealt and into the large locations on the game board, and how those elements all synergize, does seem to have quite a big influence on your ability to do well in the game. And I do think that is my biggest criticism of the game, is that randomness in the setup and the lack of helpful heuristics for players to understand where the valuable objectives are and which ones are going to be easier to score and to do well at. A lot of them seem to reward you for things that are good to do anyway or are going to happen naturally, while others ask you to specifically go out of your way and compromise efficiency in order to score them, and those are just worse. And so I do wish those were tighter and better balanced than they are.
Yeah, I mean, one element of the game that I've not mentioned, all those sort of upgrades may come with a flask icon on it. These flask icons don't do anything, but they are only worth scoring if the scoring tiles and the scoring objectives are out. The abilities they have are okay, but they're not necessarily better or potentially, without anything that scores those flasks, good enough to take over anything else that comes out.
There are some cards that trigger off of the flasks, and the abilities that they offer by triggering off the flasks can be incredibly strong. There's one card that gives you a resource of your choice once per flask. So if you have 5 flasks, 5 resources of your choice just from that one card, which is massive. Like, if you're at home and you don't know what any of that means, it's a very powerful ability. The thing is, that card might not come up. So if you've built your strategy around collecting flasks and that card comes up, awesome. And it doesn't, very bad. Or it comes up when it's someone else's turn and they just buy it and you never get a chance at it, big sad. So there is a fair amount of randomness in a game that has a lot of moving parts and a lot of interworking mechanisms. And I don't want this to sound like too much of a downer. I don't know where Barry's necessarily going with this review, but I will observe these criticisms at this stage. More information, more thoughts to come. Please keep listening.
Yep, sure. So what we've discussed isn't even the only areas of variance in the game. You mentioned the faction boards. I'm now drafting factions as well, but those factions come double-sided and different abilities on each. Different tech trees on each side of those. The player order matters. I'm also doing the card draft at the start. I'll give you an example. The one game we played, there were no yellow cards in the opening draft and no yellow cards on the market. And whilst you can draw blind from the card deck, it took me 3 or 4 attempts at fishing to find the yellow card, which is often your food resource generator, which allows you to build at range. And so like that was just random. The terrain layout, including the back of the tiles, when you're building, it matters where the resources on that tile is, because if you can put them next to a building you've already made, you can generate those resources immediately. But if they're split and you can't get the 2 possible terrains on them, that matters as well. Like there's ABC layouts on tiles, and even which 3 cards come out of your deck first. Like you start with 6 cards, you get 3 cards to start with. Once you put them to sleep, you get your cards in your discard pile, and those just rotate every time you hibernate. So Revive is a game that attempts to balance through randomness, right? Because with enough players taking enough actions and all of them having some degree of uncertainty to them, it should even out, right? That is the law of averages. So Revive, I think you have to be aware going into it, is a game of opportunities rather than pure strategy. Your winning play is to position yourself in a way to take advantage of the luck that may or may not follow. So where I'm saying that, when you flip a tile with your first action, you can then place the terrain before deciding to build. If you build first, you are at the mercy of the layout of the tile you flip next to it during an exploration, which is perhaps not taking advantage of the potential opportunities that you could happen there. So, build your module upgrades to take advantage of the combination of cards that you've got in your deck. When I don't have any yellows, there's no point in me taking a yellow card upgrade, for example, even if I'm trying to top deck one. So having a plan in Revive is good, but being able to adapt is better. The game plays pretty quickly, and the game can often end before your engine gets going. So the game is an engine builder, but even at the point where you're just starting to feel like you've got that little bit of power for how difficult it is to assemble a really good working engine, the game can sort of end out of nowhere. Particularly in the 4-player game, you've got 3 other players to get through, and those players could scoop up 2 or 3 artifacts on their turn, and there's only 12 artifacts in total. And so you get them incidentally, and you get them by achieving things on different tracks, and you can work towards them, but you also get them just for scoring points. And so a player who is actively chasing these artifacts and pushing the tracks that get them can score 2 or 3 in a turn. Once there's 2 or 3 gone, you may think, okay, next turn I'm going to hibernate, and then I'm going to have a big turn, and then that'll be kind of the end of the game. No, you might not get that hibernate turn to refresh everything. You might just have to work with what's left. The game can snap towards the end, and I think if you're playing 4 players, I would definitely recommend the long version where you add in sort of 2 extra artifacts to be taken before the end of the game. And I may even say, if you just want to see your engine run a little bit, put those 2 artifacts in at lower player counts as well. But getting up to the point where that engine is going is a lot of fun and does provide a lot of decisions along the way. Do you focus on modules to improve every card action that you're playing? But the game also encourages you to spread those modules, because the first one you put in each card slot gives you an immediate benefit. Additional ones don't. So do you focus on 1 or 2 powerful slots? Perhaps you combine that with sort of weaker cards. Some cards let you play another card, so you could chain them together. You can use your fast actions and hibernate quickly, get a bonus when you hibernate, reset everything, go again, have these big powerful turns, but you're then having to refresh more quickly than the other players. or do you try and drag the most out of each hand? Do you make it go as long as possible? Do you get the maximum value out of everything that you can do before hibernating? Do you snipe those small factory spots so other players have to pay more to build their networks around you? You unlock the machinery parts early, so you get those little action bonuses quickly, and then you can get sort of these sort of half actions, these little modifiers to your turn a lot quickly. Maybe you rush exploration. You build up your hand of cards every time you reveal a new bit of terrain. You get a new card, and so you want to go for the best options. You want the more powerful cards from the marketplace rather than your starting cards. Do you push into the cities and try and get all the artifacts quickly? If you can get into 2 cities, that's often the winning strategy. In fact, the game even suggests a main goal of the game is to reach and populate the large ancient sites. And if you can ever get to sort of 3 of them, that might be enough to push you over the edge, even if you ignore your upgrades and your engines. You've worked for efficiency, you're getting the most out of every action towards these points. Maybe you hoard as many artifacts as you can by pushing up the tracks, get the best scoring objectives, rush hibernation. At some point, hibernating itself works towards ending the game. You discard artifacts as you go, but then you can stop other players who are spending time building up their engine from doing anything. So the game is full of all these decisions and all these opportunities, and I would say it's never so full of potential as in those opening moments when you have to decide how you're going to start this Rube Goldberg machine rolling. Do I rush my cards? Do I eke enough for a small factory? Can I get in this space before another player does? Or do I gather resources and go for a bigger factory? Do I gather resources and go for an explorer? Should I push towards a large city or get the bonuses? Each option is valid. Each one has the potential to set your course for the entire game. But I will say it rarely reaches this potential from what you think it might do. You never, on any given turn, you never really get off a massive combo, right? You're still limited to these 2 main actions, and the problem is a main action almost never chains into another main action. It will chain into some benefit, some bonus, some additional resources, maybe make a future action more powerful, but you rarely can do, well, I'm doing this, which lets me do this, which lets me do this, which lets me do this. You can eventually unlock enough on your board that the fast actions and the machines can let you have a lot of goes, can let you do a lot of things, but they're not those main actions. And the main actions are what you really need to be putting pieces out on the board, to be earning points for the most part. So that's something to think about. With the game ending potentially a little sooner than you might like, you don't get to see these big turns, and the game itself doesn't have the real potential for turn after turn after turn after turn for it. Now, like I said, I've played 8-10 games and I've had turns where I've got loads of stuff.
Yeah.
But I've only ever done one thing. I've placed a big factory. I've put a guy down.
Well, at its heart, what I think is really interesting about Revive, to build on what you're saying, it is a game of it's a game of pacing. It's the end game is determined by the alien artifacts running out, and those alien artifacts are distributed largely by players just doing what they need to do to win and progress the game and expand their engine, build their engine. You research technologies. To the end, you get an alien artifact. You research you unlock things, you get an alien artifact. You earn victory points, you get an alien artifact. So the actual pacing of the game as well, it never ever gives you more than 2 main actions. You got 2 main actions, and that's it. You get all these free actions, which are your machines that Barry's alluded to. They are all unique functions, and you turn them on with lightning. You'll accrue more lightning, so you can do more free actions. And then there are the hibernate rounds where you stop dead and you reset everything in the machine. And as a main action, you can add cards to the machine. This is how you trigger the cards. And occasionally cards will allow multiple cards to be played into the same spot. So you might fill up all the spots and then you need to hibernate to clear them, or you can add a couple of cards. And if you're doing that, then if you can chain some cards to trigger the spot multiple times, you can get a big bonanza. However, typically of resources. However, the resource stockpiles are limited to 6, which is actually quite a significant limitation. It's not like, oh, and then you can never have more than 6, but you're rarely going to hit that. That cap's actually something you need to think about and manage. So you're forced to do actions that spend resources so you don't lose out on a big income or something like that. And so it really is this game of pacing, like constantly challenging you to ask yourself, is it worth playing this action? Is it worth playing this card? I've built this incredible spot on my machine, but that produces enormous amounts of food. But if I've got all this food, then I don't need to use it, or I could use it right now. But again, I just don't need food for what is probably the best thing for me to be doing. So it's a really sort of interesting conundrum for sure. But I think if you're the kind of engine builder that derives satisfaction from this long-term planning to this sort of ultimate turn of triggering the Rube Goldberg machine, you know, where the goldfish bowl knocks into the dominoes, which hits the slingshot, which pings off of the road sign, which swings around and cuts the rope, so the birthday cake splats into your opponent's face. Like, you're never going to get to that moment where all of these things are chaining together to create this awesome effect. Like, it's not that sort of engine builder. It's more like you're trying to keep the micro escalations in line with what everyone else is doing so you don't fall behind the pace set by the person who's building the fastest engine.
That's fair. Yes, so you do have to be aware of that. There is a cap on what you can really achieve on any given turn. The player interaction, as I alluded to at the start of this, is quite light. Right? There's not a huge amount of things you can do with each other. You can kind of get in each other's way. You can definitely interrupt somebody's plan by building in the spot they were going to build in. You can potentially try and cut them off by revealing the tiles they're next to for exploration before they do. But one of the main ways of doing this is there's a secret final action, which is flipping a switch on your board. And that switch lets you either gain a resource, just any one resource, or you can use another player's card that they put in a top slot. And so again, usually generating resources. So if you think they've got a particularly powerful card, you don't get any of their module benefits or anything, but you can generate 2 resources potentially by flipping this switch. However, that puts that player's card that you've targeted into their discard pile, freeing that slot up for them to use again this turn. And if it was a powerful card, you now have given it to them again when they hibernate and refresh. That will come back to their hand for them to play again a second time. So this flip action, this switch action, the more you kind of get into the game, the more you realise actually this is a really weak action to be taken.
Yeah, I think it's a misleading action as well, because it can really seem like it's going to solve a problem for you now. Like, oh, I desperately need food. I've played all my food, or I've occupied all my slots. I can't generate food. Oh, I can flick the switch, get the 2 food off Barry's card, and it might solve the problem now, but unless it's going to allow you to play into a position that's going to become very difficult to access in the future, the long-term effect of getting Barry that card back faster and freeing up a slot is probably going to be more detrimental than getting access to your action now, which I think is misleading because it feels like you've done something good, but actually it's probably bad. Except under the very rare case where it's allowed you to secure a very valuable position on the main game board. So it feels like an action that's easy to understand and just quite good. Like, oh, they've got a good card that they've played and now I can access it too. Aha. But actually, in order to use it effectively, you need to really understand the game, because really you need to know when it's worth doing. And to do that, you need to really be able to keenly read the board state.
And so that kind of brings me on to the expansion, which I'll talk a little bit about. It seems as if that was probably a problem they maybe recognised that wasn't so good. And the expansion adds an ability in addition to the switch flip, which lets you take a scoring tile, but at the cost of one of your cards in hand, that you can then cash in as a free action later. and it will have something like have built 3 factories, have 5 flasks, and it'll be an escalating system. So have 2 flasks, cash it in for 2 points, have 3 flasks, cash it in for 4 points. Whatever. You choose when to cash it in. And that gives you points on a secondary track. So there's a devotion track in addition to the victory points, but they just get added together at the end. But the tracks are, the scoring tracks are logged separately because you earn bonuses independently on each. And you can actually convert points. If you earned 4 normal victory points, you can cash them in for 2 devotion points. If you earn 4 devotion points, you can cash them in for 2 victory points. So there is sometimes a balance between, I'm going to trade these in so I can go up here. Because the main thing you're going to get on this secondary victory point track is a 4th colour of card. And those are blue cards with jellyfish on them. And blue cards strong, right? Blue cards easily outpower anything in the base game. Top or bottom, whatever side you want to use for them. And they also have much more unique powers and much more interesting powers on them than the base game cards. And so this tier 2 of card, the second level of card, I think that there'd be better being within the base game somewhere, right? They can't just be random market cards because they're so much better than a normal card. But the strength of them lies in them both being strong or powerful, but they're also fun, right? The actions are unusual, they're fun, they're things you can build up towards. Where we're saying flasks earn you points, there's things you can do with them that just break the normal rules of the game. Well, they don't even break the normal rules of the game, they're just different from what you get in the base game of it. But at the end, all the points are just added together as normal. The devotion track gives you a 5th location. You can go to a large city to score points on. You earn additional devotion points because fixed positions of lakes come out on the map, and if you build next to them every time you hibernate, you get a little bonus as well. And so it's just it adds a little more. And actually, the games we've played with it, whilst my scores have been exponentially higher because it slows the game down when you're focusing on 2 different victory tracks, you earn those artifacts a little later. It's not really been worth it, I wouldn't say. The only thing I would like would be the blue cards in the base game. Everything else is fine. It adds a bit of variety, but from what you may have gathered from what I've said, there's already a lot of variety there. Right? There's a lot of randomness already from what's out there. It doesn't need more things to do, necessarily. So, all that said, despite that variety and despite all the different things that can happen in a game, you've probably seen it all after 4 to 6 games, right? You're not going to get a different experience necessarily. You can try different things, you play different factions, you focus on different aspects, you're working towards different goals, although they're the same ones you see game after game. But the core game of Revive holds up because it is engaging and fun and interesting decisions to be made each time. You know, by the time it comes back around to you and higher player counts, often you have to rethink what you originally planned to do. Sometimes just having that time to think by the time it comes back around to you, you've realised, actually, I want to do this instead. I was going to do this, but actually I'm more excited by moving over here now. Now that you've opened up that bit of terrain, I can see a path to getting that upgrade, which will get me enough food that I can build my chain or my network chain back the way I was originally going, much faster. So I'm going to do that. And so the game is a game of edging out points and trying to make the most of, as I say, of these opportunities. Every game I've finished, I've been like, if I'd done this different thing 6 turns ago, knowing how the game's shaking out now, I could have had an extra 15 points and that would have been enough to win the game for me. And you're always thinking back to what would have been a better decision, and you can get better at the game, and you can, to a degree, balance out that luck with the better player often coming out ahead. I'm not saying that just because I often win. But yeah, I had a good time with it. So I don't know what you wanted to add to your plays of it, Mike.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that So first off, I like Revive. I played it once in real life, and it sort of sat at the back of my head as a game I really wanted to go back to because I thought it had a lot of interesting stuff going on. Now, I do think in real life there is a little bit of a problem with downtime, which you wouldn't have experienced on BGA. For example, the hibernate turns where you're not even doing anything. People are resetting stuff and things like that. So there's a little bit of a downtime issue. But overall, I really like the game because I feel like it offers interesting interactions, a lot of interesting interlocking mechanisms, and this sort of idea of hand management coupled with sort of upgradable card play spots, coupled with the modular free actions that you're developing. It feels quite unique. It feels like there's a landscape to do something really cool. I do think it's held back a little bit by the fact that it never really escalates into something hugely satisfying. But then when you do get a turn where you get to pull off a couple of really cool moves, that kind of fills that need, that desire. So that's really cool. I think the biggest detraction from it is probably the amount of randomness in it gives it quite a low skill ceiling. And the skill that is there is not necessarily, or the skill ceiling that exists is largely untangling which pursuits are more worthwhile than others. So it's sort of disentangling confusing heuristics rather than developing awesome gameplay. Now you've played more than me, so maybe you can push back on that a little bit. But certainly, I've not seen my scores get steadily better, and I've not felt like every time I play it, albeit I've only played it 3 times, I've not felt like every time I come back to it, I'm filled with greater understanding that I can apply to this game because the setup might be different enough. I think drafting the character classes or the factions, drafting the player factions probably helps mitigate this. We haven't tried that yet in the games I've played, but I think you'd have to play a certain number of games to get to that point as well. But I think that the actual mechanisms of the hand management, the system where you're discarding things out of the slots into the discard pile, and that's only resetting every other hibernation phase, and this sort of idea of the hibernation phases and when to do those in order to recover your cards and reset your machine. I think that's all interesting enough and unique and weird enough that I'm keen to play the game and engage with that system. I do enjoy it, and I like having it around.
I will say in terms of improving and getting better, like I'm 8-9 games in now, my scores are going up, right? So our first game, we got 60 odds, then I was kind of floating around the 80s, then I kind of bust 100, then in the 2 expansion games, I first got 130 and then 180, and then I went back to the base game, scored another 130. So, but I credit almost all of that to identifying where I'm going to get the most points at the start, right? So, looking at the outside objectives and picking the right objective card has doubled my score. I am a bit better at the game. I understand what I'm doing more. I'm looking for those opportunities. I can do the timing better. Sure. But I think a majority of those points have come from understanding where I'm going to be getting my points from, and that is right at the start, and that is the randomness, where the most deterministic randomness is, the kind that not everybody's going to share.
Well, the game is short enough and tight enough, and to be fair, I haven't tried the long variant, but certainly the core game rules are, the game is short enough that you do need to be quite efficient and quite savage about pursuing those scoring objectives, or you'll just miss them.
Yeah.
And then it will be over.
Oh, there was the one element I want to complain about in our 4-player game, because it's a variable game end, I had one fewer turn than everybody else, and I would have won. No, I probably wouldn't have won, but I would have had a higher score.
Well, I observed that. Well, yeah, and that depends on how you feel about that, right? Because you may have had a higher score, but I don't think it would have changed the outcome of the game.
Yeah.
And to to that point, there is the game end is triggered by someone taking the last artifact. They then get a 4 bonus point tile. Everyone else gets 1 more turn, and then the game is over. And the alien artifacts, which trigger these asymmetrical endgame scoring conditions, are all gone. So now you just get 2-point bonus tiles, which is significantly less good.
Yeah.
There is obviously some amount of guesswork around whether or not it is a good idea to end the game now or not. And that will depend entirely, I think, on whether or not you believe other people are going to get into those large scoring locations, whether or not you think that those alien artifacts that you can collect are going to be worth more than, say, the extra turn. I mean, unlike Dominion, I found that the uneven turns in this don't necessarily seem to correlate to the player's success unless they're already successful, because it is the as we discussed earlier, the sort of the pacing of the engines. They never get to sort of an accelerated level where they're massively catapulting people ahead, but they do accelerate gradually over the course of the game. And by the end, I do think it's quite apparent usually who's won. Just by you can tell who's built the best engine. They've got the most stuff. They're in the most places. They're going to earn the most points. You can usually tell whose engine's done that. And so I think that one uneven turn is not going to fix a whole game of falling behind the best engine.
Anyway, if you like the sound of this, but you may be unsure of Revive, or if you want to know whether it's similar to games you've played that you might like, I think you might enjoy, or players who enjoy Gizmos might like this. Similar sort of combos, but, capped at where you can go. Gizmos plays much faster and much more straightforward in terms of what you can do. Tillatum, again, it's got about as much going on as Revive, with limited comboing potential depending on the number of actions you get from the dice and what you can kind of do with that. Or potentially Terraforming Mars, which we've obviously spoken about a little earlier. You got the similar 2 action restriction on your turn before going to the not hibernating. What do you do in Terraforming Mars? You just pass, and then everybody goes to the next generation.
Yeah, you just pass from your out of actions. Yeah. Do you know what kind of reminded me of, in a weird way, a little bit, was Concordia? Because it's got that same kind of hand building thing and territory on a board thing. So I think if you like Concordia, then this might be worth looking at.
Yeah, potentially. Obviously, Concordia hands is also your scoring, which is less the case. And
which is
very...
The
deck building is a much smaller element, I would say, of this game. But comfortable.
Yes, yeah. The cards in this game, much less consequential than the cards in Concordia. Yeah.
And that's all I've got to say about that.
That's all I've got to say. So I think my question then is, the final sort of test, I suppose, would be, are you going to go out and pick up a copy?
Yeah, so I am not, but Joe probably is. So he's been my main 2-player partner. He's of the view that it is the best game he's played this year. I know it came out last year, but this is the first of us playing it. And so I don't necessarily need to, except for the fact he's moving away in about 2-3 weeks. So even if he gets it, it still won't be in the group. He will bring it to Barrycon, so got that going for us. But he's looking for it being for sale on one of the second-hand groups, just kind of tracking that at the moment. So yes, I want to see what it's like in real life. Like you say, the downtime and the fiddliness of setting up the map might be a killer compared to playing on Board Game Arena. But the game is one I'll almost always be happy to play, I think. There's the core loop. Sometimes games, you see it all and it's like, okay, I never need to go back to that. Other games are like, I've seen it all, but now I'm interested in what I can do, or what different this game, or playing the player, I think becomes, and playing your luck becomes the game for Revive. And I think it's interesting enough and fun enough that I would want to continue playing that at the moment indefinitely. Maybe I get fed up of it eventually, but it is that kind of game where I can keep going back to it, and I'll always get some fun and some potentially improvements out of it.
Yep. It is a 2022 release, by the way, so slightly older. I do think it's still very, very available if you want to buy it, although I think the expansion is quite hard to find.
Is it though? It's cheapest by $10 on Amazon at the moment. Whether or not that's still the case when you go to look. But yes, very interested in Recall. I don't think it's the same game. I don't think it's like a direct copy of the mechanisms or anything. But I'd be interested to see what heritage elements are carried over and whether there is any DNA shared between the two games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think Recall is being marketed as a sort of revive second edition or anything like that. It's supposed to be lighter. It's the same designers, and there's some artistic overlap, but that's about all we know so far. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled and see what Recall is all about.
Nice.
And so I guess I've got a copy of Revive from 2022. I will endeavor to get it back to the table. I think after playing it on BGA, I'm keen to give it another try and revisit it, because it's been quite satisfying. And I don't know why I didn't play it more. I've just noticed it's top 90. It's number 90 on BGA as well. On BGG.
It's gone up one since we started playing. It was 91 when we first had a game last week.
So there we go. But that's going to do it for Ready Steady Podcast today, right now. This one's done. There'll be another one in 2 weeks. So, do the thing where you follow it or you like it. If you have any major disagreements with us, feel free to leave a comment. If you have many agreements, leave a comment. We will read all the comments. If we don't respond to them, it's nothing personal. We just don't respond to everything, but we might respond if you comment. So do that, and we will appreciate it. This, of course, is only possible thanks to the support of the patrons on Patreon. There's a link in the description if you feel like supporting this kind of mostly independent board game coverage. Of course, there's some sponsored videos up on the channel as well, but there's also non-sponsored videos up on the channel. If you want to get involved in what is produced on the channel, you can by supporting the Patreon and then messaging me directly and letting me know your frank thoughts on it. In the meantime, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more of it, then spread the word so that we can keep making more of it. Bye for now.
Bye.